under the warm glow of string lights at a classic American suburban home in Philadelphia. Laughter spilled from the backyard, where family and friends gathered for a relative's graduation party. The smoky aroma of grilled burgers mingled with the sweet scent of jasmine from the garden, painting a perfect summer evening. Emily Carter, 26, stood by the white picket fence, her floral dress swaying in the breeze. She flashed a smile, but her eyes kept darting toward Ryan Mitchell, her boyfriend of 3 years, who'd slipped inside to grab more drinks. "He's been gone a while," Emily muttered, excusing herself from a chat with her best friend to find him. Her heels clicked softly on the hardwood hallway as she approached the kitchen. A sharp voice stopped her cold just outside the half-open door, her mother, Margaret Carter, cool and cutting. "Ryan, I'm just being honest," Margaret said, calm but razor-edged. "Sarah's stronger, more driven. You need a woman like her, a young lawyer, just promoted at her firm. Emily's sweet, but her art won't take you anywhere." Emily's heart froze. She pressed herself against the wall, breath caught in her throat. Sarah, her older sister, always the golden child, perfect and untouchable. Emily never imagined her mother would pit Sarah against her, especially not to Ryan's face. Peeking through the door's crack, she saw Ryan standing there, 2 beer bottles in hand, brows furrowed but silent. No defense, no pushback, just a heavy quiet that sliced through her like a blade. "Sarah looks at you differently," Margaret pressed, her voice honeyed now. "You two have a spark Emily can't match. Think about it, Ryan. Do you want someone who lifts you up, or a dreamer with a paintbrush?" Ryan's head dipped, fingers tightening around the bottles. I don't know, Mrs. Carter," he mumbled, barely audible. But Emily didn't need more. His hesitation screamed louder than words. Her heels felt like lead as she backed away. She wanted to burst in, scream, shatter something to drown out the pain tearing through her chest. Instead, she returned to the party, plastering on a fake smile and chatting as if nothing had happened. Inside, a quiet fire sparked. When the night ended, she blew Ryan a kiss, her eyes icy behind the grin. Later, alone in her small apartment surrounded by unfinished canvases, Emily sank to the floor, tears streaming. "If they think I'm weak, I'll prove them wrong," she whispered. Clutching the promise ring she'd shared with Ryan, she yanked it off, tossing it into a corner. By morning, she left a curt note for her mother and Sarah. "Don't look for me." With that, she walked away from Philadelphia's familiar streets and her broken heart, vowing they'd never see her fall. 3 weeks after that fateful night, Emily Carter still felt her chest tighten at the thought of Ryan and Sarah. She'd tried staying in the city, pretending life was fine, but every corner, from the diner they loved to the park bench at Rittenhouse Square where Ryan once promised, "We'll conquer the world together, Em," mocked her with memories. Now, holed up in a tiny suburban apartment to avoid her mother and Sarah, she craved escape. One Saturday afternoon, Emily slipped into her favorite coffee shop, the Brewed Awakening, hoping for a latte and a moment's peace amid her storm. It was their old haunt, where she and Ryan used to sketch ideas over endless cups. The bell jingled as she entered, a warning she didn't heed. Then she saw them in the corner, bathed in soft golden light. Sarah, her blonde hair gleaming, laughing brightly, and Ryan across from her, his hand clasped tightly around hers, gazing at her the way he once did Emily. Emily froze. A barista's coffee nearly spilled as she stumbled. Sarah glanced up, catching her eye. For a split second, unease flickered across her sister's face, then melted into a smug smile. "Emily, didn't expect to see you here," Sarah said, her voice syrupy but sharp. Ryan turned, paling, yanking his hand back like he'd been caught red-handed. You okay?" He stammered the words hollow. She wanted to scream, to hurl her coffee at them, to demand why they could erase her so easily. Instead, she stood tall, lips pressed tight, heart pounding. "Fine," she said, her voice colder than she knew she could muster. "Enjoy yourselves." She spun on her heel and left, ignoring Sarah's call after her. The October wind stung her face, but it was nothing compared to the chaos inside. Slumped in her beat-up Chevy, Emily gripped the wheel, tears falling. "I can't stay here," she whispered. "I won't let them watch me break." That night, Emily spread a U.S. map across her tiny kitchen table. Closing her eyes, she let her finger drift, landing on a name: Chicago. A strange city, big enough to swallow her, tough enough to test her. She had no plan, just a suitcase of clothes, her cherished paintbrushes, and enough savings for a few months if she stretched it. She packed her paintings, the dreams she'd once shared with Ryan, and loaded her car. Before leaving, she stared into her bathroom mirror, meeting her own red-rimmed eyes. "They think I'm weak? I'll show them who I am," she said, voice trembling but fierce. As dawn broke, Emily drove out of Philadelphia, leaving behind its cobblestone streets and the ghost of a love that had crumbled. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, guiding her toward Chicago, a city where she knew no one, armed only with the stubborn fire in her heart. She had no clue what lay in wait, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't let betrayal define her. When the "Welcome to Chicago" sign glowed under the pale morning sun, Emily took a deep breath. "This is my shot," she told herself, pressing the gas and diving into the city, ready to face whatever challenges loomed. Chicago greeted Emily Carter with a ferocious storm, as if the sky itself was testing her resolve. Rain poured in sheets, blurring the neon lights as she navigated her rusty Chevy through unfamiliar streets. 2 days had passed since she fled Philadelphia, carrying a broken heart and a suitcase of fragile hopes. "Just start over," she muttered. But as she parked outside a rundown motel on the city's edge, the musty smell and blaring car horns made her wonder if she'd made a mistake. She rented a cramped apartment in Uptown, where the walls were stained and the elevator groaned like it might collapse. With her meager savings, she figured she could scrape by for 3 months if she pinched every penny. Each morning, she taped another job listing to the fridge, next to the deafening silence of dozens of unanswered applications. "An artist? This town doesn't need paintings, sweetheart," a coffee shop manager scoffed when she asked about a side gig. Every rejection hit like a hammer, echoing her mother's voice. "Your art won't get you far." Still, Emily gritted her teeth, opened her laptop, and kept firing off resumes to galleries, startups, and finance firms she barely understood. After 2 weeks of constant no's, a glimmer of hope appeared. Meridian Investment Group, a small firm downtown, called her for an interview as an administrative assistant. Emily stood before her mirror in a borrowed blazer, forcing a confident smile. "You've got this," she whispered, though her hands shook as she tied her hair into a neat bun. At Meridian's sleek office, the air was crisp with expensive suits and relentless typing, making her feel like an outsider. The interviewer, Carol from HR, slid her glasses up and said, "Miss Carter, your resume's eclectic, but you've got no finance experience. Why should we hire you?" Emily inhaled, thinking of the sleepless nights she'd spent perfecting a canvas, of surviving the sting of betrayal. "Because I can turn chaos into order," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm not afraid to learn, and I don't quit." Carol raised an eyebrow, a faint smile flickering. In the end, Emily landed the job, assigned to Ethan Brooks, a young investor known for bold ideas and an office drowning in disorganized files. Her first day was a nightmare. Ethan, with his messy brown hair and piercing gaze, tossed her a stack of papers and snapped, "Sort this before the afternoon meeting. Don't embarrass me." Emily scrambled, clueless about the difference between a financial report and a memo, Googling terms furiously. At the last minute, she realized she'd sent a critical email to the entire client list by mistake. "Are you kidding me?" Ethan barked as his phone buzzed with complaints. Emily stood there, face burning, apologizing in a trembling voice. He just shook his head. "Do better tomorrow, or you know where the door is." That night, alone in her chilly apartment, Emily curled up on the floor, hugging her knees. She thought about calling Philadelphia, admitting defeat, letting her mother and Sarah smirk, but then her eyes fell on her paintbrushes in the corner, reminders of turning blank canvases into art. "I'm not done," she whispered, dragging herself up to study finance until dawn. The next morning, she arrived early, fixed her errors, and organized Ethan's files cleaner than ever. When he walked in and saw his tidy desk, he gave a curt nod, but his glance held a hint of respect. "Good," he said. "Keep it up." Every day became a battle. Emily learned to read reports, juggle schedules, even anticipate Ethan's needs before he barked them. Yet her mother's voice still haunted her. "You'll never be enough." One late night, as she wrestled with a spreadsheet, Ethan strolled in with 2 coffees. "You don't have to do it all alone, Carter," he said, handing her a cup. "Start trusting yourself. I see what you're capable of." His words, simple as they were, cut through her storm like sunlight. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, Emily felt she wasn't just surviving, she was building something bigger, a new version of herself. 3 months had passed since Emily Carter stepped foot in Chicago, and every day at Meridian Investment Group felt like a fight for survival. She'd learned to navigate the alien world of finance, transforming Ethan Brooks's chaotic paperwork into streamlined systems and anticipating his outbursts before tense meetings. What surprised her most was Ethan himself, the gruff boss with a razor-sharp stare who started noticing her beyond her assistant role. "Carter, you've got a knack for reading people," he said once, after she'd casually pointed out a red flag in a client's contract. "Don't waste that on coffee runs." His blunt praise fanned the quiet fire inside her. Gradually, the office stopped being just a place to scrape by. Late afternoons, as the sunset bathed Chicago's skyscrapers in gold outside the window, Ethan would pull Emily into unexpected conversations. He'd talk about his dream of building an investment firm focused on sustainable energy, not just for profit, but to change how the world works. "Ever thought about doing something bigger than yourself?" he asked, twirling a pen like a restless kid. Emily smiled, thinking of the paintings she once poured her heart into, the dreams her mother called fanciful. "Sure," she said, "but some people told me to be more practical." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Practical's a trap. You've got guts. Dream big." His words were a key, unlocking a door Emily had bolted shut long ago. She started carrying a small notebook, jotting down ideas that sparked when Ethan rambled about markets or when she dug into investment trends on her own. She realized she wasn't just good at organizing, she could spot details others missed, like an artist seeing colors beneath layers of paint. But just as she began to trust herself, a new wave crashed, threatening to sweep away everything she'd built. One Monday morning, the air at Meridian felt heavy as lead. Whispers spread fast. A major client, responsible for nearly half the firm's revenue, had pulled their funds, unhappy with Ethan's bold strategies. "They say we're too risky," Carol from HR murmured in the break room. "If we don't win them back, the whole company could tank." Emily saw Ethan in his glass-walled office, chin propped on his hand, staring at his computer. For the first time, he didn't look like the invincible boss, just a man teetering on the edge. She knocked and walked in without waiting for an invite. "I have an idea," she said, her voice shaky but firm. Ethan glanced up, brow furrowed. "Carter, now's not the time for games." But Emily didn't back down. She spread a sheet of paper on his desk, covered with notes she'd scribbled late last night. A plan to win the client back by proving the long-term value of sustainable investments, backed by data she'd quietly pulled from the archives. "They don't want risk? Show them the bigger risk is missing this opportunity," she said, pointing to a chart she'd sketched. Ethan stared at her, then the paper, his eyes slowly lighting up. "Where'd you get this stuff?" he asked. Emily shrugged, hiding a smile. "I'm not just good at coffee runs." The client meeting happened that weekend at a swanky downtown restaurant, where chandeliers gleamed and the air smelled of premium steak. Emily stood by Ethan's side, heart pounding as he pitched their plan, honed over 3 sleepless nights. She stayed quiet, watching, but when the client, a skeptical real estate tycoon, threw a curveball question, Ethan glanced at her like he was saying, "Your turn." Emily took a breath and stepped forward, her voice clear as an artist laying down a final stroke. "If you pass on clean energy now, in 5 years, you'll pay 10 times to catch up. We're not selling risk, we're selling the future." The room went silent. The tycoon raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. "Kid, you've got nerve. I like that." They kept the client. As the elevator doors closed after the meeting, Ethan turned to Emily, eyes sparkling. "Carter, you just saved our asses. You know that?" Emily grinned, finally feeling like she belonged here. But deep down, her mother's voice lingered. "You'll never be enough." She gazed out the window at Chicago's twinkling lights like stars against the night. "You were wrong," she whispered, clutching her notebook. With Ethan by her side, Emily felt for the first time that she wasn't just surviving, she was rising, step by step, into the strongest version of herself. 6 months after Emily Carter saved the day at Meridian Investment Group, she'd become indispensable to Ethan Brooks's team. No longer the nervous girl fumbling with finance jargon, she ran Ethan's schedule like a conductor, anticipating his meltdowns before high-stakes meetings. Late nights at the office, with Chicago's lights flickering outside like a living painting, they'd sit over cold pizza and stale coffee, tossing around big ideas. "Carter, ever thought about running your own show?" Ethan asked one night, eyes blazing as he talked about building a sustainable investment firm focused on clean energy and startups. Emily laughed, thinking of her old canvases. Sure, but I thought artists weren't allowed to dream big in your world. Ethan chuckled, tossing a pen her way. You're not just an artist, Carter. You turn chaos into magic. I'd need someone like you to make this dream real. His words made her heart race, not just for the idea, but for how he looked at her, like he saw something she hadn't yet. That night, back in her tiny uptown apartment, Emily flipped open her notebook and scribbled, "My own company, why not?" Why? A month later, Ethan stunned the office by announcing he was leaving to start his own venture. "I'm launching Brooks Capital, focusing on sustainable investments," he told Emily over drinks at a cozy bar near the office, where the smell of beer mixed with jazz notes. "And I want you with me, not as an assistant, but as an operations partner. You'd be the brains keeping it all together." Emily froze, her wine glass nearly slipping. "Ethan, you're nuts. I've never run anything. What if I screw it up?" He shrugged, a mischievous grin spreading. "Then we crash together, but I'm betting you won't." Terrified but electrified, Emily said yes. They rented a shoebox office in West Loop, barely big enough for 2 desks and a junky coffee maker. Pooling their savings, they started Brooks Capital from scratch. The early days were brutal. Potential clients ghosted, banks laughed at their loan pitches, and bigger firms circled like sharks. Emily worked herself ragged, cold calling investors, designing pitch decks, while Ethan jetted around selling their vision. But every night, hunched over papers together, they drew strength from each other. "We're like 2 lunatics trying to conquer the world," Emily laughed, as Ethan scribbled a messy chart on their whiteboard at midnight. Then the biggest wave hit. After 3 grueling months, they'd finally convinced Harold Grayson, a notoriously tough Chicago millionaire, to invest. The final meeting was set at a ritzy hotel on the Magnificent Mile where Grayson would sign the deal. Emily and Ethan prepped for a week, rehearsing every answer, double-checking every figure. But hours before the meeting, Grayson called. "I'm out," he said curtly. "Your idea's good, but too risky. Good luck." The phone slipped from Emily's hand, the world collapsing around her. She looked at Ethan, who stood frozen, face drained of color. "We're done," he muttered. "Without Grayson, no one else will touch us." The room was suffocatingly silent. Emily felt the shadows of her past creep in, her mother's voice sneering. "You'll never be enough." She thought of Ryan, Sarah, all the times she was dismissed as a failure. But then she stood, marched to the whiteboard, and started writing. "We're not done," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "Grayson's not the only player in Chicago. I've got a list of 20 other investors. We'll call every single one, start from scratch." Ethan stared, his despair shifting to surprise, then a faint grin. "You're a damn fighter, Carter." That night, they worked until 2 a.m., dialing numbers, firing off emails, booking new meetings. Emily thought of how she'd once turned a blank canvas into a painting, stroke by stroke, even when no one believed it would take shape. "This is our painting," she told Ethan as dawn neared, "and I won't leave it unfinished." As sunlight crept through the office window, the phone rang. A smaller investor they'd pitched weeks ago called back. "I want to meet today." Emily grabbed Ethan's hand, heart racing. They hadn't won yet, but they were still in the fight, and for the first time, she knew she was strong enough to never give up. Brooks Capital, the brainchild of Emily Carter and Ethan Brooks, survived its stormy first months. After the gut punch of Grayson's rejection, they'd secured a handful of smaller investors, enough to keep the company afloat. Their West Loop office now buzzed with a few eager new hires, the printer humming like the heartbeat of a growing dream. Emily was no longer just organizing files. She was the company's operational core, designing systems, managing finances, even shaping Ethan's strategies. "You're turning this place into a well-oiled machine, Carter," Ethan said once, eyes gleaming as she pitched a new plan. But what caught her off guard was the warmth she felt when he said her name, or the way her pulse quickened when their hands brushed over paperwork. Late nights weren't just about work anymore. They started sharing more about themselves. Ethan's stories of fixing bikes for cash in Chicago's suburbs, Emily's cautious mentions of her old paintings, sidestepping Philadelphia and its scars. On a business trip to Milwaukee, a snowstorm stranded them. Holed up in a cozy bar under dim lights and piano melodies, Ethan gazed at her over his whiskey. "You know, Carter, I've never met anyone as stubborn and talented as you." Emily laughed, hiding her flushed cheeks. "You're no picnic either, Brooks. Who can stand that know-it-all attitude?" They cracked up, but their eyes locked longer than usual, as if standing before a new door, unsure whether to turn the knob. Their connection grew, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. One night, prepping for a big meeting, Emily glimpsed a text on Ethan's phone left on the desk. "See you Saturday, miss you," from someone named Olivia. Her heart sank, memories of Ryan's sweet-talking lies flooding back. Without thinking, she grabbed the phone and confronted Ethan as he walked in. "Who's Olivia? What game are you playing, Ethan?" He froze, then laughed, but his smile faded when he saw her hurt. "You're serious? Olivia's my cousin, Carter. You think I'm that guy?" He snatched the phone, voice icing over. "I thought you knew me better." The argument erupted in the empty office. Emily couldn't hold back, old wounds bursting open. "I trusted someone before, and he betrayed me. How do I know you're different?" Ethan stepped closer, voice low but sharp. "Because I'm not him, Emily. I'm here, pouring my soul into this dream with you. But if you don't trust me, what are we even building?" His words hit like a punch, silencing her. She turned away, tears threatening, but pride kept them at bay. "I need time," she whispered, leaving Ethan standing there, fists clenched. The next few days were heavy, like Chicago's sky before a storm. They worked together, but their exchanges were clipped, cold. Emily felt she was losing not just a partner, but the one person who'd become her anchor. One afternoon, as she reviewed reports alone, Ethan walked in with a vanilla latte, her favorite. "I'm not great at apologies," he said, setting it down. "But I don't want to lose you, not just at the company, but in my life." Emily met his gaze, heart pounding. "Ethan, I'm scared. Scared if I let you in, I'll break again." He stepped closer, eyes earnest. "I can't promise you the world, but I promise to be honest. You deserve to be loved, Emily, not doubted." That night, they sat in the office, baring their hearts. Emily spoke of Ryan, Sarah, how she'd believed she wasn't enough. Ethan listened, never interrupting, only taking her hand when she paused to wipe tears. "You're the strongest person I know," he said, "and I want to be with you, not just to build a company, but a future." In that moment, under the office's soft glow, Ethan leaned in, kissing her forehead gently. Emily closed her eyes, fear melting into a warmth she'd never known. One ordinary evening, amid scattered papers and cold pizza, Ethan dropped to the office floor, holding a ring he'd twisted from copper wire. Not a diamond, but something he'd crafted during a lunch break. "Emily Carter, you're the best partner I've ever had," he said, voice shaky. "Marry me? I want us to face every challenge together." Emily laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You're insane, Brooks," she said, but nodded. "Yes, I'm in." They embraced in the cluttered office, knowing the road ahead held more storms, but certain they'd never let each other fall. 3 years passed since Emily Carter said "I do" to Ethan Brooks in Brooks Capital's chaotic office. From a tiny West Loop space, their company had grown into a powerhouse in sustainable investing, featured in Forbes and lauded at Chicago's biggest conferences. Billboards for clean energy projects they backed now dotted the city, and their new Loop office stood as proof of a dream once scribbled on a whiteboard. Emily was no longer the trembling newcomer. She was a razor-sharp COO, leading a team of dozens, designing systems that made Brooks Capital hum like a finely tuned engine. Ethan, with his knack for persuasion and bold vision, closed major deals, but always said in speeches, "Without Emily, I'd just be a dreamer with crazy ideas." Their personal life bloomed too. Emily and Ethan traded their cramped apartments for a charming Lincoln Park home, where maple trees blazed red each fall. Sunday mornings found them sprawled on the couch, reading papers and bickering playfully over who made better omelets. The copper ring Ethan crafted was replaced by a simple, elegant wedding band Emily wore as a reminder of their journey. But even in happiness, Emily kept one corner of her heart locked, Philadelphia, where her mother, Margaret, her sister Sarah, and Ryan Mitchell remained shadows she avoided mentioning. One Tuesday morning, as Emily reviewed reports in her glass-walled office overlooking the Chicago River, Ethan walked in, holding a finance magazine. "You should see this," he said cautiously, sliding it across her desk. A small article in the corner read, "Mitchell and Carter Law Firm Faces Bankruptcy After Failed Expansion." Emily's blood ran cold. Sarah and Ryan, who'd married and started a law firm in Philadelphia, had botched a New York branch, racking up debt and losing clients. Ryan had even jumped ship to work for a bigger firm, Meridian Investment Group, the very company Brooks Capital was eyeing for acquisition. "How long have you known?" Emily asked, voice steady, but fingers gripping the magazine. Ethan sat across from her. "Since yesterday, when the analytics team sent their report on Meridian. Ryan's their compliance head, but I wanted you to hear it from me before the office buzzed." He paused, studying her. "You okay?" Emily nodded, but memories flooded back. Margaret's praise for Sarah, Ryan's gaze when he chose her sister over her. She pushed the magazine away. It's just the past. It won't affect the acquisition. But the past wasn't done with her. Days later, checking mail at home, Emily found an envelope with Margaret Carter's stiff, familiar handwriting. Inside was a brief letter. Emily, I know you're doing well in Chicago. Sarah and Ryan are struggling. Their firm's gone under. I hope you can help, family, after all. I'm proud of you. Emily gave a bitter laugh, tossing the letter onto the table. Proud? Margaret never said that when Emily needed it most in Philadelphia. The letter wasn't an apology, it was a plea to bail out Sarah and Ryan, as if Emily owed them anything. That night, she told Ethan about the letter, voice trembling with anger. They think I'll beg to help? After everything they did? Ethan took her hand, eyes steady. You don't owe them a thing, but you get to decide what to do with that past. Face it or let it shadow you forever. His words kept her up all night. Staring into the mirror, she saw a woman stronger than the girl who fled Philadelphia, yet part of her still burned to prove herself. Not for revenge, but to show she'd risen above. The next morning at the board meeting, Emily stood, voice clear. I propose we accelerate the Meridian acquisition. It'll expand our clean energy portfolio and solidify our Midwest presence. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded in support. When the deal closed, Brooks Capital owned Meridian and Ryan Mitchell, now an employee several rungs below them. The office buzzed about Emily and Ethan's big win, but for her, it was more than business. It was a chance to confront her past. Over dinner at home one evening, Ethan pitched a bold idea. Let's throw a gala to celebrate the Meridian acquisition. Invite investors, partners, the Meridian team, including Ryan. He paused, looking at her. And what about your mom and Sarah? Not to gloat, but so you can stand before them, owning everything you've built. Emily gripped her wine glass, fingers trembling. Facing Margaret, Sarah, and Ryan made her heart race, but not from fear, from a new fire igniting. Okay, she said firmly. Invite them. I want them to see I didn't just survive, I won. As Chicago's lights twinkled outside, Emily felt a fresh strength. She wasn't the broken girl who left Philadelphia. She was Emily Carter, a woman who'd built an empire, a love, and a life no one could take away. The upcoming gala wouldn't just be a party, it would be her stage to face her past, and this time, she'd stand tall. Time swept by like a Chicago autumn breeze, and before Emily Carter knew it, the night of the gala celebrating Brooks Capital's acquisition of Meridian Investment Group had arrived. The Museum of Natural History downtown transformed into a dazzling stage with energy-efficient LEDs illuminating marble walls and organic floral arrangements dotting the hall. A jazz band played smooth melodies, blending with the clink of wine glasses and laughter from investors, partners, and staff. Emily stood beside Ethan Brooks, her husband, in a sapphire silk gown that hugged her frame, accentuating her green eyes, now alight with confidence. The wedding band on her finger gleamed, a reminder. She was no longer the broken girl who fled Philadelphia 7 years ago. Emily and Ethan had planned the gala as a statement, not just of Brooks Capital's success, but of the values they'd built. Sustainability, integrity, innovation. For Emily, though, tonight held deeper meaning. Margaret Carter, Sarah Carter, and Ryan Mitchell, the three who once tore her heart apart, had RSVP'd. The invitations she sent weren't mere courtesies, but a silent declaration. Come see who I've become. Greeting guests near the entrance with a poised smile, Emily felt an odd calm. Nervous, Ethan whispered, his hand resting lightly on her back. She smiled, shaking her head. No, this is our turf. They arrived as the clock struck 8. Margaret entered first, in an elegant black velvet gown, silver hair swept high, exuding the authority of Philadelphia's elite. Sarah followed, her red dress striking, but her eyes lacking their old swagger. Ryan trailed behind, his tuxedo crisp but his face gaunt, as if the years had worn him down. They paused at the threshold, visibly stunned by the event's grandeur, and by Emily, standing like the queen of an empire she'd built herself. She felt their gazes sweep over her, from her designer gown to Ethan's steadfast presence beside her. Emily, darling, Margaret spoke first, enveloping her in a theatrical hug. I had no idea you'd pulled off something like this. Emily returned the embrace, but kept her distance, her smile polite but cool. Mother, I'm so glad you could make it. This is Ethan, my husband. Ethan shook Margaret's hand, voice steady. Pleasure, Mrs. Carter. Emily's worked miracles for our company. Sarah stepped forward, lips tight, her eyes scanning Emily for a crack. Congrats, sis. she said, voice sweet but sharp. Didn't think you'd climb this far. Ryan only nodded, avoiding her gaze. Hey, Emily, you look great. You. She led them into the hall, her composure flawless, though her heart pounded. Each step beside Ethan, each handshake with top investors felt like a proclamation. She no longer needed their approval. The real climax came during dinner. As guests savored herb-crusted salmon, Sarah stood abruptly, wineglass in hand. I'd like to say a few words, she announced, her voice carrying, drawing every eye. Emily froze, fingers clutching her napkin. Ethan glanced at her, his look asking, You good? Sarah smiled, but her eyes were icy. I'm so proud of my little sister Emily for all this success, she began, voice dripping honey. But I'll admit, it's surprising to see her here in this cutthroat finance world. Back in the day, she was all about painting, right? Who'd have thought she'd find someone like Ethan to steer the ship? The words, cloaked in praise, were a dagger aimed at Emily, implying her success hinged on Ethan, that she was still the fragile girl of old. The room went quiet, curious glances darting to Emily. Margaret smirked, as if Sarah had scored a point. Ryan looked down, visibly uneasy but silent. Emily felt heat rise to her face, memories of past slights flooding back. But then she caught Ethan's eye, felt his hand squeeze hers under the table, his gaze saying, You're the strongest person here. She rose, slow and deliberate, her sapphire gown shimmering under the lights. Thank you, Sarah, she said, voice clear, ringing through the hall. But you're mistaken. I didn't just find Ethan. We built Brooks Capital together, from a tiny office to tonight. I don't need anyone to steer me because I learned to steer myself. She paused, locking eyes with Sarah, then Margaret, then Ryan. I used to think I needed others' validation to feel enough, but I realized all I needed was to believe in myself. And I did, not to prove anything to anyone, but because that's who I am. She raised her glass, smiling. Thank you all for being here. Tonight's for us, for Brooks Capital, for dreams that never quit. The hall erupted in applause, some guests standing. Sarah sank into her seat, face pale, her forced smile gone. Margaret gripped her glass, her eyes betraying unease for the first time. Ryan met Emily's gaze, and now she saw a flicker of regret in his, but it no longer mattered. The rest of the night felt like a dream. Ethan took the stage, announcing the Meridian acquisition and welcoming its team, including Ryan, who bowed his head as the spotlight hit. Emily moved among guests, chatting with CEOs and investors, each step cementing her strength. As the gala wound down, Margaret found her in a quiet corner, voice low. You've changed, Emily. Maybe I was wrong about you. Emily looked at her mother, not angry, just calm. You weren't wrong, Mother. You just didn't see me, but I saw myself, and that's enough. That night, as Emily and Ethan returned to their cozy Lincoln Park kitchen, sitting with 2 mugs of cold coffee, she leaned into his shoulder. How do you feel? Ethan asked, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. Emily smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't known before, as if an invisible weight had lifted. Lighter. Not because they saw me, but because I don't need them to anymore. She gazed out the window at Chicago's twinkling lights, like stars against the night. 7 years ago, she'd left Philadelphia with a shattered heart. Now, she stood here, not just surviving, but truly living, with a man who loved her for who she was, a career she'd built from nothing, and a heart finally free.